Hi guys, welcome back to the shop. Thanks for joining me this week. Today we're going to go through the process of gluing our tri-lam bow that's got a bamboo back, belly, and maple core. And last week when we left or parted ways, I was getting ready to fashion the riser piece. I have it right here. So we're prepared to go. It is a Ipe and maple and Ipe setup there. We tempered the belly lambs of bamboo. So this is bamboo, not Ipe. I know the color can be a little bit deceiving, but this is bamboo. And today I want to really kind of talk about how the gluing process for this project is going to go. So when you have 3 laminations, and in this instance what's going to play to our advantage is that all of our surfaces are in fact flat. We have to go through some pretty special attention when it comes to dealing with a crowned surface on our bamboo when we do a bamboo back and belly build like I have earlier on this channel. However, in this instance, we're dealing with all flat surfaces, which changes the glue up process a little bit. Additionally, and something that you'll want to hang out for, especially if you're somebody that wants to give fiberglass back and belly bow a try, this glue up is exactly the process that you would want to follow, or it's one of several processes that you can use. Some guys use an air hose and a top and bottom to their form. In this instance, I have just the back side of the form put together, and we can go through the process that you could use if you wanted to do a fiberglass glue up. So if that's something that interests you, hang in there and I will go through that process here today. Before we get too far along in this build, I really want to take a time out and explain or describe exactly what we're dealing with here with all of our parts. All right, so you can see everything laid out here, the risers in the back. We've got our 2 belly pieces, then next in line with the core in the center and our bamboo backing strip right here at the front. Very flimsy piece of bamboo. Now, you would wonder, you know, with such flimsy pieces of wood, how we're going to get anything that resembles a hunting weight or a decent draw weight bow out of these components. And that is all going to come in the shape of the limbs. So we're dealing with Duoflex is what I'm attempting to build here. And of course the glue is going to offer some shear strength in there as well. Not quite as much as if there was just a back and a belly, but we are going to get a little bit of shear strength out of that glue. So that having been said, I think it's important to note that the pieces here, the components, are actually quite wide. Once everything is glued, we are not going to have much in the way of opportunity to tiller this bow, at least not in terms of a belly scraping type of tillering. We can do some minor adjustments with some scrapes on the belly, but there's just not that much material here to work with, number one. And number two, the limbs are already going to be very thin to start. And that is why they're quite wide. I've taken advantage of a very wide design. So on camera, this can look a little bit deceiving, but these limbs, the pieces I've got here are full 1 5/8 inches thick, so they're a little, or wide rather, so a little bit wider than 1 1/2, so wider than my mold that we'll be using. And then they taper out to tips that are almost 3/4 of an inch wide. Lots of corrective width. Okay, so what this does is give me a lot of width to work with, because if we're going to manage the weight of this bow, once it's been glued up, we're going to do that on its sides. We can manage some of the tiller as well with how fast the tapers on the sides go, just to kind of give a little bit of a I guess comparison this is a backing strip, and my backing strips are the widest component of any of my builds for a bamboo backed epay, with the intention of being 60 pounds when it's completed. And you can see the width in comparison here. And I leave my backing strips pretty wide so that I can tiller the weight via width. All right, so this is much wider than this bow is actually going to finish out, more than likely. Hopefully, we've got the same scenario going on here with this very wide limbs, and hopefully we are able to taper those down and get a more narrow style bow and keep some weight. But in the event that we need to preserve weight, we've got the width to get us there. All right, so that is the reasoning for the width there. And then if we take all of our pieces, God, and the neighbor just got home. He's a welder, so his truck makes all that backup beeping noise. I'm not going to put calipers on this for you guys, but the total stack, so the width of all these, or thicknesses of all these pieces combined is 0.38 inches. Interestingly enough, that is right at about 3/8 of an inch. All right, so that's the thickness that we're dealing with on this bow. Pretty thin, which is why we're compensating for width at the beginning of everything. All right, so let's move on from here. We'll start putting our pieces together in the mold, and I'll show you how we get this thing glued up. All right, I'm going to go through just a quick dry run of the setup that we are going to be using. Here is the mold that we did at the start of this project. Pretty smooth throughout. So through the process of construction, we gave this some very smooth edges. However, we want to ensure that we don't get any weird micro undulations in our final build. And so to help rectify that, instead of using like a heavy dense foam like we would use if we were using a regular bamboo back, we're going to use some vinyl. And this vinyl strip is cut to the exact width of the form. It is from like vinyl wall base, if you're familiar with that. So like if you're in an office building or in a hospital or something and you see that 4-inch thick vinyl base that's at the bottom of the wall and it joins the floor, that's what this is, just cut into strips. So I have got that laid down. First, it's going to give just the slightest bit of cushion. I mean just the slightest bit, but it's enough to take any of those little micro undulations out. Also with the backing to help absorb any micro undulations, which we pretty basically do not have. We're pretty well put together here. But we will set, of course, our belly lamb in place, centered. Well, I'm going to back up one step and say at this point we would layer this with plastic, all right, so that we've got plastic wrap to work over the tops of our limbs to contain all the glue so we don't get it all over the form and etc. So here we go. Picture plastic in there. We'll have our back down. We'll put in our belly piece here. Okay. And the riser comes next. Put my riser over there. Okay. And this is where, you know, everything's glued together at this point. We'll glue this, the riser. We'll clamp this into place here. Okay. I don't know that I've got a clamp super handy. This may not be, oh, it's going to be wide enough. Nice. Just wide enough to handle the job here, you know, at least for demonstration's sake. All right, so everything at this point would be glued together, and then we make with the belly pieces, and we want the belly piece to hang over a little out here at the tip because as everything bends down, obviously it's kind of like on the outside of the racetrack. It's going to run, it's going to start pulling up shorter and shorter as we go along. All right, so once this is glued, we're going to do a similar type operation. We're going to lay a piece of vinyl down on here. We're then going to have a reinforcement piece of masonite right here. All right, masonite will set on top there. And in this particular instance, we're going to start our wrap at mid limb here, so that we can wrap down in one direction. Of course, that'll be the second direction. First, we're going to wrap everything down in this direction, so we can get everything tightened down tight in through here. And then we're going to restart our wrap with a new wrap and wrap it around the curve here. And that way we can ensure that we're wrapping, we want to be able to wrap up the ramp of our fades instead of wrapping down it. And that just helps, it will give us a better glue line wrapping up this ramp than doing it the former way. Okay, once all this here is in place, we'll wrap the plastic, do the same thing. All right, so that is the process that we're going to go through, and it is pretty important that we get these vinyl pieces in place. They're just enough cushioning to make sure that we're getting a good purchase along all of the length of these limb pieces, and we're getting a good glue line as a result. All right, guys, here's our setup. You can see that I've got plastic down on the mold here, and my pieces lined up each in a row as they will go on the build. Something I didn't cover but definitely needs to be addressed is the open surfaces of these laminations need to be coated with tape to ensure that you don't get any glue residue on those. So the glue surfaces are raw, but the exposed surfaces are then covered with tape to ensure that we keep our mess to a minimum. I've got our belly pieces ready to go here, and we'll get the rubber bands poised and ready to go. But this is it. It's pretty much go time. So I'll get everything constructed here, or at least put together, and get you back here in just a moment. Okay, guys, here is the glue up. I could not quite get those tips down tight to the form, and so I kind of rigged up a clamp here against the post of the block clamp there, or the wooden clamp, to hold those tips down. I had to do it on both ends, so got pretty darn close. And from what I can see, it looks to me like we got up these ramps pretty well. Of course, there's so many bands right there to create so much pressure that it's hard to see the glue line. So in any event, here we go, glued up. We're going to let her set for a night, or a day rather. So this time tomorrow, we'll be taking it out of the mold, and we will continue from there. So check in again with me next week when we take this guy out and see just exactly what we ended up with. Pretty excited to see how those recurve tips work out on this bow. So anyway, I will talk to you guys next week.